We are just past halfway point of the Detroit Pistons season. I am joined by Zarek Turner of Bully Ball to talk about the Detroit Pistons season thus far, some upcoming trade deadline news or some rumors, and also we're going to give some hot takes for you guys in today's episode of the Locked On Pistons podcast.
You are Locked On Pistons, your daily Detroit Pistons podcast. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network. Your team every day.
What's the deal? Welcome back to another episode of the Locked On Pistons podcast. Per usual, I'm your host, Kuka Hill. You can find me over on Twitter at Kuka Hill. I want to thank you guys for making Locked On Pistons your first listen of every single day. We're free and available on all your podcast platforms. If you haven't already, head to the YouTube channel at Locked On Pistons. Hit that subscribe button or leave us a 5-star review on whatever podcast platform you're listening to this on. And today's episode is brought to you by Gametime. Download the Gametime app, create an account, and use code Locked On for $20 off your first purchase. Like I told you guys, we are joined by Zarek Turner of Bully Ball. We have known each other for a few years now. He has grown up quite a bit. When I first came around, I think he was like 13 years old, so like really young. It makes me feel even older. But Zarek, how you doing, man? You doing the podcast?
Yeah, I'm actually I listen pretty much every day, believe it or not. It's because like it was the intro hit, and I was like, "You're listening to the Locked On Pistons." I was like, "I know this." But yeah, I'm excited to be on. Thank you for having me on. I haven't talked like audibly Pistons in a minute, just because I've been doing a lot more writing and pictures and whatnot. So I'm excited to talk about the Pistons.
Yeah, and he's been doing a great job again over at Bully Ball. We've met up a few times at the Pistons games. We're both credentialed this year, and he's been doing an absolutely fantastic job writing, photography, all of it over at Bully Ball. So definitely follow him over on Twitter at Zarek Xavier, or you can follow the Bully Ball Twitter account. So let's get into today's episode, man. So we are 42 games through the Pistons season, and I'm sure my everyday listeners, they obviously know my thoughts on this team and how I felt through each stage of the season. The first 10 games, the next 2 weeks after that, December, they know how I felt. After the first 42 games, I know there's a lot you could possibly have as a takeaway, and there's a lot of thoughts you possibly could have. But if you had to summarize what your biggest thoughts are after watching this team for 42 games, what is it?
Objectively, train wreck. And it's unfortunate because like I was someone, I know you were very firm, like you thought this season was not going to be great. If you read my I did a top 5 bold takes before the season started, and one of them was I was fairly confident this team was gonna hit like a play-in spot because I was just like, Cade's healthy, Monty, like I was thinking the 0.5 second offense was gonna be a thing. I was thinking like Monty, Duran, like a lot of the internal development was really gonna hit, right? Obviously not what's happened. Overall, it's disappointing. It's disappointing to see the lack of development when it comes to a lot of players. Isaiah Livers was one of those guys who I was really expecting to pop this season. Obviously he's not even on the team anymore. And then on top of that, it's just like puzzling coaching decisions quite often. Like the whole Jaden Ivey thing was mind-boggling, I think, to everybody. The decision to continue starting Killian, like I used to be a Killian guy back in the day, believe it or not. I was very much a Killian. When the 2020 draft was happening, I was like very pro Killian. My brother was actually at the time very pro Halliburton. Like he was devastated when we picked Killian Hayes. I was like, I think it's a great pick. Like I saw the upside, whatever. But at this point in 2024, Killian Hayes is just not going to put it together with the Detroit Pistons. And that's okay. I'm not saying he's not going to put it together, period. But I don't see it happening. The problem is he keeps playing a lot. And I know Cade's out, but like you got to find a way to use like maybe Sasser more or use Ivy at the point more, just because Killian at the point, like even against the Wolves, it was the Wolves, wasn't it? Or who'd they play yesterday?
You talking about this last game, the Bucks?
Oh, the Bucks. My bad.
There you go.
Against the Bucks, Killian comes in the fourth and just the momentum of this game completely changed within like genuinely like 60 to 90 seconds. That's how much of a liability he's been. So it's just stuff like that that's really been puzzling. And then of course the lack of accountability and moves from the front office so far. Obviously, I think the Muscala Gallinari trade looked pretty good yesterday. But overall, like I just it's really puzzling it took that long to get our first trade of the season. So yeah, I think if I were to sum it up in just one word, it's really puzzling, you know.
Yeah, this season has been, I think it would be correct to say a season from hell. And you've had, I mean, they've done. At one point, I was coming on here in a Darth Vader kind of, Darth Vader kind of persona going on. Like that's how bad it had gotten. Obviously, they were like global news because of how many games they had lost. Like I was getting interviewed by England news sports radio. Like it was like it had reached really lows. I think if I had to, and we're going to talk about this a little later, but halfway through the season, like I said, there's a bunch of different thoughts that we've had. There's a bunch of different takeaways you can have about this team, obviously, but just how bad it's been. But if I had to just say, okay, I've watched this team for 42 games based off, where this team was planning to go and what they were planning to have happen this year, what's my biggest takeaway is that change has to happen and that it's probably going to happen, and fans are probably not going to be happy with a lot of the things that happen because things are going to change, whether it ends up being a good change or whether it ends up being a bad change. I think a lot of the preconceived thoughts that a lot of fans had before the season about this front office, about this roster, about this coaching staff, about some of the young guys, I think all of that really, almost 100% of it, really outside of Cade Cunningham, I feel like almost everything has been flipped on its head. And that's not to say like guys like Jalen Duren haven't been good or guys like Jaden Ivey haven't been good. I just think that everything that we thought or that fans thought about, the core in general and just the immediate future of that core and this roster, I think has been flipped on its head a little bit. I think you're probably going to see, and I think you have to at this point with how bad the season is, you're probably going to see some changes that will leave, whether it's in the next few weeks or in the offseason, I think a lot of fans are probably going to be fighting each other, whether about it was a good move or bad move.
Yeah.
But the fact of the matter is, and I think what I've been trying to get across in the podcast a lot is that the fact of the matter is when you are 4-38 through 42 games, when you are in the middle of the worst season in professional sports history, when you are quite literally a trade away that doesn't hamper the other team's roster, when you are that away from having the longest losing streak in sports history, there is nothing that can't be changed. Like there is nothing that doesn't need to be changed. Like when you reach that point, nothing is untouchable. Like nothing is untouchable and things have to change. I don't care how much you like guys. No one, if everyone was as good as everyone thought they were, there's no way that you would reach that point. Now, that's not saying they wouldn't be bad. They could still be normal bad. But worst season in professional, like in NBA history, guys, there's no way that guys would be, that the season would go that bad if guys were as good as fans thought they were before the season. And that's just not with the big names either. I'm not just talking about a Cade or Jaden Ivey or Jalen Duren or Asar Thompson. Like you mentioned, an Isaiah Livers that me and you both were pretty high on. I thought he was going to have a good season. He's not even on the team anymore. A guy like Marvin Bagley, he's not even on the team anymore. I actually thought he took a little bit of a step forward, but he's not even on the team no more. You mentioned it, Killian Hayes, who has just been a liability the last few weeks, and it's just been really, really bad. That's another guy. I mean, Isaiah Stewart. I feel like Isaiah Stewart's taken a step forward in some areas while other areas have still been lacking. Like it's literally from the top all the way down. You have not seen, I feel like, what fans wanted to see from almost every level and outside of Cade the last 33 games. Like outside of that, like every single level has left you asking for more and wondering what happened. So I think that's my biggest takeaway is that change is going to happen with this core, with this roster. And I think I think it's going to cause a very heated offseason. We're going to dive into that a little bit more in just a few minutes. And we're going to come back. We'll hear what Czar has to say. That's something that we're really going to dive into when we talk about this upcoming trade deadline. But I got to tell you guys about one of our lovely sponsors. So if you guys are ever thinking about going and getting some tickets to any kind of event, whether it's to a Lions playoff game, whether it's to a Pistons game for whatever reason you're buying those ones, whether it's to a concert, a theater event, anything, you should go with Gametime. Someone like me, I procrastinate to the very last minute every single time, and oftentimes it screws me over. I end up with terrible seats. I end up with terrible pricing. It's just all bad. But with Gametime, it hooks you up in both areas. Not only do you have last minute ticket deals all the way up until the very last minute with Gametime, which is absolutely amazing for me, you also get to see what the seats look like on the app. So you don't have to get the tickets, then wonder, okay, is this a good seat or not? No, you can go through each ticket and you get to see what the seat looks like in each ticket. I absolutely love Gametime. Another thing that I absolutely love about Gametime as well is that they email your tickets right to your email. So you don't have to go, or not email it. They do not email. Let me say that. Instead of having to go through your email looking for your ticket, you can instead just have it on your app right there. Because I have like 500 emails. I'm not going to go digging through all that. It's going to be tough to find them. Instead, you can just go to the app, show the ticket right there. Absolutely amazing. I absolutely love Gametime. It's absolutely amazing. You can take the guesswork out of buying tickets with Gametime. Download the Gametime app, create an account, and use code LOCKEDON for $20 off your first purchase. Terms apply. Again, create an account and redeem code LOCKEDON for $20 off your first purchase. Download Gametime today. Last minute tickets, lowest price, guaranteed with Gametime. So I want to thank you guys again for making Locked On Pistons your first listen of every single day. We're free and available on all your podcast platforms. If you haven't already, head to the YouTube channel at Locked On Pistons. Hit that subscribe button or leave us a 5-star review on whatever podcast platform you're listening to us on. That's another great way to support the podcast. So we just got done talking about the Detroit Pistons making changes and how I believe change has to come when you are this bad, no matter what you thought preseason. And with 2.5 weeks ago until the trade deadline's coming up faster than I thought, we've already seen OG Anunoby get moved. We've seen Pascal Siakam get moved. Both those guys were on the Pistons wish list of free agency guys that are already gone. And we've heard a bunch of trade rumors with other guys. We did see one minor trade with the Detroit Pistons already. But with just 2.5 weeks ago until the trade deadlines are, what's your overall thought process with this team heading into the deadline?
So I had written a piece, I want to say like late December, maybe mid-December, just about like how we got to this point. Like this was amidst the losing streak, and it went from like the beginning of the rebuild back in 2020 to like this past off season. And one of the things I had said in there is just kind of like moving forward, like what's going to happen. And I kind of gave like a blueprint because obviously there's no way to tell what moves specifically are going to happen for sure. But I could say like the blueprint would kind of resemble the first team I mentioned was like the 2019-20 Timberwolves, and that was like a team where they ended up trading like Wiggins for D'Lo. They got Vanderbilt, I think Malik Beasley too around that deadline, and Juan Hernan Gomez. Shout out Hustle on Netflix. But that was kind of like a big deadline. Like I remember back then, I was like, this is a lot of trades for one team. And then I also used the Atlanta Hawks around that time period as well, because like Trae Young had been disgruntled and he is getting no help. So they ended up trading for Clint Capella. And I think that was like really their only big move around the deadline itself. But then in the off season, they went in and got guys like, ironically, Danilo Gallinari, Bogdanovich, and then even just vets like Lou Will, I remember, was on that team. Just stuff like that to help bolster that team. They ended up, making the conference finals. Obviously, I'm not saying that's going to happen with the Detroit Pistons, the conference finals part, but I could see a lot of roster movement from now until the offseason for sure. There is I think the Timberwolves thing is slowly becoming, I think, more of a reality because we already traded away 2 guys, so that's already 2 new players on this team. But here's my thing. I feel like with this team, there's kind of a lot of uncertainty. Just, I mean, as there should be with a team that's 4-38. But the biggest thing that kind of throws me off is like, I feel like because Tom goes out and he says like basically like we're not assessing the front office until the off season, around like That was like the 27th loss in a row. I think that's when he came out and said all that. Here's the thing. I feel like if you trust this front office and you trust Troy and his team to put something together, then you let him cook this deadline, right? Like you just let him do what he has to do to not save this season, but just save the direction of this team. Because I think that's like a huge thing that like I think you tweeted something like it. Like
I did.
I agree. Like you're not saving the season with any move you do this year. It's cooked, like it's over, it's done. But the biggest part of this whole trade deadline and this offseason is next season and moving forward in general, because you have Cade, who's coming off of an injury last year, and now he's going into his third year, and he's definitely going to be expecting a max contract, right? Because I don't think he's going to turn it down like some people were saying in the beginning of the season. So you have Cade coming into that max, and then that starts putting pressure on the front office to be like, okay, well, we have our franchise guy. We can't just keep losing all the time. So I could see a lot of roster movement happening. And I think what you alluded to in terms of just like fans arguing, because it was already bad before the season, like before any moves ever started, there was a lot of Pistons Twitter civil war for no reason, in my opinion. But a lot of that will be happening. And I think if they remain with Troy and all these other guys, it'll be interesting. I'll leave it at that. It'll definitely be interesting.
No, I think that is the best word to say about it. I've said it for the last few weeks. I think this next few weeks is going to be incredibly interesting, and what they do immediately entering the offseason is going to be incredibly interesting. My thoughts about this upcoming trade deadline is basically exactly what you just said. If the ownership trusts Troy Weaver in this front office, either do or you don't. There is no in between with this. Either you trust them or you don't trust them. If you do trust them, then like you said, you just let them cook, because it's not like they're going to be fired in the offseason because you trust them. They're going to be around still. If you do not trust them, one, you don't let them make moves at this deadline. And two, they shouldn't be in the front office anymore. Like they should not have their jobs as of the 21st of January 2024. If you don't trust them, Tom Gores, and you don't, okay, this may not be the front office I want to go forward with, they shouldn't be here anyways. Like they should not be here right now. So that's exactly why I agree with it. If the fact that they're here right now lets me know that they have to be. I mean, I feel like Tom Gores kind of hinted at this as well, that they have to be aggressive at this deadline to keep their jobs. Like he wants to see change, or like not doing anything would actually be what gets them canned. Not the losing streak, not the bad season, like just not doing anything sounds like that's what would get them canned. So I expect them to be aggressive at this deadline. I don't know if it necessarily means something's going to happen, but I expect them to be aggressive at this deadline. And whatever ends up happening, whether it's this deadline or in the offseason, yeah, like you said, I think there's going to be a lot of civil wars going on. I think there's going to be a lot of arguing and fighting going on. Because, look, and this will be the last thing I say, and we can move on to a more fun segment. I am telling you guys, Cade Cunningham is entering – he is going to be entering, what, his fourth year next year, technically his third because he missed the second one. If Cade had not taken the jump that we've seen over the last 3 games, you could maybe get away with it. You could maybe get away with like having the patience and be like, hey, you know what, let's just keep go, let's just stay patient, whatever. Cade has taken that jump over the last 30 games. He has been exceptional. He looks like a guy that if you put a team around him, you may not, I'm not saying you go win a championship, but you should be at the very least a playing team if you had a team around that guy. Like that guy is ready to play. And he feels that way. I'll just leave it at a lot of people feel that way. If he had a team around him, he could get this team to the play-in. And with that, like you said, Czar, with his max contract or his max rookie extension coming into play, you don't have time anymore. As you shouldn't. You should, because this year was supposed to be the year.
Yeah.
But you no longer have the time of saying, well, what if this guy just hits his ceiling? We can wait for the ceiling. Because by the time if you wait for that ceiling, your main guy is you're gonna piss off your main guy, and you're gonna be running into a situation like all these other teams in small markets run into with their main guy, where guys get disgruntled. He ends up asking for trade years down the line. You don't have the time no more. Like, sorry to say it, you messed up this season. That's on nobody's fault but them. They messed up this season, but now this is the predicament you're in. Your main guy is taking that step, and he's ready. he wants that next step to happen. You no longer have time to just sit around and wait for people to hit their ceilings, because people hitting their ceilings may be 4 or 5 years from now, and you don't have that time for that to happen. So read into that however you want. That's just the reality of the situation. It was caused not by the fans, not even really by the core players themselves that everyone cares about. That this is a situation created by the front office and ownership, and this is the situation they've put themselves into this corner, and it is what it is. So when we come back, we can talk a little bit more on that subject if you want to keep going, Czar, and then we'll move into some hot takes. But first, I've got to tell you guys about one of our lovely sponsors. So a few years ago, when betting was illegal in Michigan, I had absolutely no idea anything about it. And then it became legal, and I didn't know where to go. And the first place I went to was FanDuel, and I haven't turned back since. The NFL regular season is wrapping up, but there's still time to get in on the action with FanDuel, America's #1 sportsbook. Right now, new customers get $150 in bonus bets guaranteed when you place that $5 bet. That's $150 in bonus bets, win or lose. The app is extremely easy to use, and there's so many different ways to bet, like live same game parlays, find bets in the new Explorer tab, make a parlay in the Parlay Hub, the best way to find popular parlays, and more. Just like I said, when I started a few years ago, I went with FanDuel, and it was extremely easy, very easy to use, self-explanatory, a lot of fun because there's just so many different options you can do on FanDuel. So visit FanDuel.com/lockedon and make your first bet a layup and get $150 in bonus bets, win or lose, when you place a $5 bet with FanDuel, the official partner of the NFL. So I want to thank you guys again for making Locked On Pistons your first listen of every single day. We're free and available on all your podcast platforms. If you haven't already, head to the YouTube channel at Locked On Pistons, hit that subscribe button, or leave us a 5-star review on whatever podcast platform you're listening to this on. That's another great way to support the podcast. So, Czar, just real quickly before we move into the hot takes and some bold claims that we have.
Yep.
What are your thoughts on what are your thoughts on what I just said? Do you agree? Do you disagree? Do you feel different type of way? Are you hearing different things? Where do you stand with all of it?
No, I mean, I completely agree. I think what should be interesting, and this is kind of like a read I've gotten, is like, I think there's a less than 5% chance like nothing happens from now until the deadline. But I do think there's quite the possibility that like one of those big names is not the guys like walking through the door. But that's not to say like there won't be more moves. I just could end up seeing it being like more veteran role players. Like obviously maybe a little bit more, I don't know what's the word, like prestigious, I guess, than this last trade. I mean, Gallinari still, I've been a fan of his game for a very long time, but just in general, like I like someone who's probably more towards like their early 30s, you know. But no, Cade's definitely hitting that stride, and I feel like this team would have a little more grace, and the front office would have a little more grace if last season wasn't so bad. You know, like if last season, because 17 wins by all accounts should be your worst season, right? But that's actually not going to be the case with the way the season's trending. So I just feel like with this team, in terms of the fan base, in terms of the front office, I feel like this is something I feel very strongly about. I feel like the words "if" and "should" need to be completely eliminated.
That is a bar. That right there is a bar.
Yeah, from every single person's vocabulary, because it's always just like, well, if, you know, this guy was healthy, or if, you know, we were to just do this, or if this coach was to play this guy a little more, or, you know, we should have won that game, but, you know, the refs or this or that. It's got to be done. Though, like that vocabulary has to be done. It has to be done being used. And at this point, there's no excuses for what's being put on the floor, because yes, there are certain games where like you can say it was a close one, and if you were more respectable, it could be considered a moral victory. Like I don't necessarily believe in moral victories, first of all, but the fact that like you can go up against like Minnesota, for example. And I just kind of noticed like it was like kind of like there were higher spirits. And I don't feel like that's a moral victory. Like you lost by 7, sure. But I just don't feel like that's a moral victory. Like the only time I could ever say, like in my memory of a Pistons moral victory was like that 2016 Cavs series. That's literally it. So I just feel like I agree completely, and the words "if" and "should" need to be eliminated. They just need to simply work within reality and be honest with themselves.
Yeah, I tweeted that earlier that the Pistons need to be honest with themselves, not from the front office to the ownership to the fan base. When you're 4-38, changes are coming, and it might be changes that you don't like as fans. But you have a franchise player who, this is not breaking news. This is not crazy stuff. He needs help. He wants help. He wants change to happen so he can have that help to take this team where it needs to get to. And it's going to have to happen. You can't be patient anymore, especially because it's year 4 and this is your worst season in year 4. Like you said, if it was the other way around, and okay, maybe you might, like you said, you might have more grace. The fact last season was supposed to be viewed as the worst season because Cade missed the whole year. Yeah. And then you come out this year and it's the worst season in NBA history. I've said this multiple times. They are battling the 1973 Sixers for the worst season in NBA history right now. I don't know if they're going to beat them. That team had 9 wins. We'll see if the Pistons get to 9. Who knows? But that's the reality of the situation they're in. So I want to move on to bold claims. With that said, we're going to play a game of bold claims. We're going to go back and forth and say some hot takes. Do you want to go first? Or you want me to go first?
You can go first.
Okay. I'll take some of the heat off here because what I'm going to say here is going to have everyone pissed off.
All right.
It's going to piss off everybody, but it's the simple truth. It is what it is. All right. So I love Asar Thompson. He's shooting 15% from 3. Okay. Everyone's aware of that. Yeah. Shooting 15% from 3. And he has been shooting worse than even I expected. I was high on him because they shot from the 3-point line in OTE. He had a good stretch of shooting self-created threes at the end of the season, shooting a good percentage. So I'm actually shocked that he's shooting 15%. I didn't expect him to be a good shooter, but to be like airballing completely like as bad as he's been, I'm still kind of confused on how that could be when he was shooting the NBA distance last year and was doing like self-created threes. I'm still confused by it. But he's shooting 15% from 3. Jalen Duren doesn't shoot threes at all. Doesn't shoot threes. He doesn't need to for his career. He doesn't need to. He's going to be great in his career without needing to shoot threes.
Right.
But he doesn't shoot threes at all. Jane Ivey is shooting 31% from 3. He's shooting 72% from the free throw line. I believe over the last 12 games, he's shooting 64% from the free throw line. Mm-hmm. So it doesn't exactly. There's been some talk about his form, the mechanics, the ball being in front of his face, whatever. But coming out of college, a lot of people projected him to be a good shooter. And he was a fine one his rookie year. An open catch and shoot threes, he was really good. But outside of that, he was and then this year, he's taking a step back. And then you leave Cade Cunningham, who over the last 26 games, has been a 36-37% three-point shooter. So he's taken that step as a three-point shooter. And a lot of his threes also are self-created threes. You've seen him start to get pull-up threes. So Cade looks like he's taking the step like we talked about earlier. Over the last 30 or so games, Cade is taking that step that looks like that number 1 overall pick. He's doing what he can.
Yeah.
My hot take is one of Jane Ivey, Asar Thompson, and Jalen Duren have to go. One of them is going to have to go. Maybe it's not this deadline, but in the offseason, they're going to have to go. And this is why I say this. When you drafted Asar Thompson, the whole thought process behind Asar Thompson was, yes, he can't shoot, but Jane Ivey can, Cade can, and you'll get another guy that can shoot, and that will make up for it. And it wasn't just, these guys will be okay shooters. It was Cade projects to be a really good one, and Cade has been one the last 30 games. Jane Ivey projects to be a really good shooter, and then they can go get another really good shooter to make it work with Asar and Duren, who don't shoot at all. If Ivey is going to be a below average 3-point shooter, which he's been through 2 years. He shot 34% his first year. League average is 36-37%. He's below average his first year. He's taken 3 percentage points back this year. Now you can say that was part 2 situation, all that stuff. I'm not disagreeing with that. The point is that if Ivey is not going to be a really good shooter, along with Cade being a really good shooter, you cannot start 3 below average 3-point shooters in the NBA in 2024 and think you are going to survive. That doesn't mean you need to have snipers at every position, but you can't have specifically, actually, to make it worse, one below average 3-point shooter and 2 non-shooters. Like, they're not just below average, they're just non-shooters.
Yeah.
So if Ivy was this like really great shooter that a lot of people were expecting him to become, like at least an average to above average 3-point shooter with off-ball gravity, all that stuff. That was the whole idea behind drafting Asar, that, hey, that's what's going to make it work. You add another guy that can shoot, you'll be good. That's not been the case this year. So the Pistons need a real. I'm not saying Ivy's one you get rid of. You can keep Ivy. Everyone thinks when I bring this up, that means I'm saying get rid of Ivy. You can get rid of Asar. Get rid of Asar then. Or you can get rid of Duran. Get rid of Duran then. All I know is that you can't start 3 below average 3-point shooters in the lineup with Cade, who has voiced the fact that he likes space. His brother was on my podcast talking about how they wanted space. I've talked with people and said they like space. You can't then start 3 non-shooter or 3 below average shooters, 2 of them being non-shooters. I think that's going to work moving forward. That's my hot take. One of them is going to have to move this offseason.
I almost want to say that's like a cold take, no? Because I just feel like
read the comments and the tweets after we drop this.
Because I mean, I think all of those guys have amazing potential. Like the thing with this team is I've never questioned the talent. The talent has never been a question for me. And this is something I've always been thinking, like this entire season. It's like when you see someone who's wearing a bunch of designer pieces, like maybe they're wearing Gucci and Prada and Nike shoes and Balenciaga and all this other stuff. And like they're wearing it, but just it doesn't match. Like it doesn't look good. But like all of it is really expensive, and it's good
all
quality.
really good in and of itself, but put together, it's not.
But it just looks like it's like what is this? Like it looks like some like Russell Westbrook would walk through wearing back in the day. Like it just doesn't work. Because I believe in the talent 100%, but just the fit has never been there. Just the way an outfit doesn't work if like all the pieces don't work. It's just it doesn't work. So I don't disagree with that. I guess my bold take, and I'll start off a little because I don't know how many of these we're gonna do, but I'll start off
We'll do 2. We'll do 2 each.
Okay, this will be like a little bit of a colder take, I think. Of the current Pistons, I think there will be less than 7 guys who are on this team next year. I think there will be less than 7 of the current Detroit Pistons on this team next year. I'm not saying at the deadline, but at the start of next season, I believe there will probably be like 5 to 6, maybe, of the same players on this team. And unfortunately, that just kind of has to be reality when right now 4-38. Last season, you had 17 wins. And then I guess you can't really count the season before that because that was sort of a different roster. But, between 2 seasons, there's a chance like you don't even have 30 wins. And these are seasons where you were expected, because I can say this for a fact, they were expecting to be a lot better both seasons. Like last year, the Boyan move, the Burks move, they had Nerlens Noel, even guys like Corey Joseph, Rodney Magruder, like all those vets, they expected to be making some noise. Obviously, once Cade went down, they punted on the season. That was obvious. But this season, I can tell you for a fact, they were 100% saying the question about this team isn't going to be what pick they have. It was going to be what seed they have. That is a fact. That is 100% the ideology going into the season. And it's just gone the complete opposite way. So unfortunately, it has to be reality, and it might end up being one of those guys that gets dealt. But I don't feel like that. I don't feel like a lot of this team's going to return next year.
Fair enough. Do you want to go with your next one? Or you want me to go next again?
You can go ahead.
Okay. So my next one was kind of along the same lines as what you just said. So mine was going to say that my hot take is, the second hot take I have is that of the players of the players that really matter, that fans love, and that I think almost everyone can agree with, are like guys that actually could be like on this team in a few years, whatever. There's only 2 guys I'm guaranteeing will be on the team next year. There's only 2, and it's not from a fit. You can read it as a fit standpoint, but I'm saying this based off other stuff.
Okay.
I'm going to go out on a limb. I could be wrong. I could be very wrong. Like in 2 weeks, I could be so wrong. It's insane. But I'm going to say 2 guys I think for sure will be on the team next year. I don't know anyone else. Those only 2 guys, Cade and Jalen Duren.
Yeah, me too.
Those are the only 2 guys I can guarantee will be on this roster next year. I don't think Cade has a really good relationship with Duren. I can't see them moving off of Duren because of that. Like me and James talked about it like 2 weeks ago, that Duren hypothetically is the position where you could maybe replace and still get the same kind of, you can go get a rim running rim protector for maybe, not as much money and just stack up everywhere else. Like that can happen. And you can still relatively get the same usage. But Duren is, he's really young. He has really nice ceiling. And I think he's a really good fit with Cade in the pick and roll, and his passing really intrigues everybody, including me, obviously. I just think it's going to be hard to move off of Duren with Cade. Like, Cade loves Duren. He's his pick and roll partner. I just can't see them actually doing that. So those are the only 2 guys I can see them moving or keeping for sure. Everyone else I'm unsure of. That's my second hot take.
I hold that as well. I definitely think Cade and Duren are very safe on this team. And I do know that Cade actually had a great relationship with Bagley too. So
he did.
Yeah, that's tough.
So maybe that just doesn't matter. Who knows? Maybe it doesn't matter.
True. But I do think they value Duren and his potential a lot more than they valued Bagley.
Right.
Shout out to Bagley and Livers though. They were very nice guys. And Bagley's doing well in Washington already, so good for him. My second bold take, I was sifting through a few in my mind, and I was like, what can I say? What can I not say? And I think what I'm landing at is by next season, the cap flexibility is not a discussion anymore. I don't think cap flexibility is a discussion anymore. For better or for worse, who knows? But I feel like by next season, it's going to be like you're going to be looking at the offseason, maybe looking at trades, but you're not going to be looking at free agency anymore. And honestly, maybe this will be my bold take. And it doesn't necessarily have to do with the team directly. But I think cap flexibility is completely overrated. I think it's completely overrated and overvalued. Unless like you're in a situation where like the Wizards back in the day where like John Wall was just not playing and you just have that contract sitting there. I feel like cap flexibility is completely overrated because it just lands back to like that point I said of like if. It's just the imagination of if. Like it's the box from Family Guy. It's like, okay, well, you could have $1 million or you could have whatever's inside of this box. And it's like you the Pistons have been taking the box route, and it's like it's hard to believe in at this point. So I think there will be at least one actual max contract on this team by next season, for sure. Guaranteed. I can say that, and that can be my bold claim or whatever. Someone on this team, not named Cade Cunningham, will be making over $30 million.
Now that's a bold claim. There you go. Yeah. That's a good one.
Yeah. Someone on this team will be making over $30 million by next season, for sure. I can put I can put something on it, but I'm fairly confident that by next season, someone on this team is making at least 30 to like 35, at least. And it's not going to be like Cade's obviously going to get his extension. That doesn't even kick in next season. So someone else on this team will be making that money.
Fair enough. We'll see what happens. I like that last one. We'll see what happens though. Thank you, Zara, for coming on, man. You guys can follow him on Twitter at Zarek Xavier on Twitter. And then also you can follow him at Bully Ball. Does great work over there. Appreciate you coming on, man. Had a lot of fun with it. Let me know what you guys think about everything we talked about in the comment section down below or over on Twitter at Kuka Hill. I'll catch you guys in the next one. Stay safe out here. Till next time. Peace out.
Peace.